Hey guys, Comet here. Welcome back to Oxygen Not Included. Now, I want to start off by apologizing for the delay in videos again, but as you can see from the overview, I have been very busy. There's a lot of stuff I've gotten done. This is going to be more of a retrospective video, and less of a let's play, just because the topic is so dense that there wasn't really enough time to explain it and build it all in the same episode. But I will be covering the Regolith melter here, but I want to get everyone caught up on everything else. If you're just interested in the Regolith melter, go ahead and skip ahead. But the last thing I did was the gunk boiler. Just make sure to make that out of thermium, not steel. But then after that, I decided I was going to double my duplicate count. I'm at, well, if you include the 2 that are in the rockets, I'm at 50. So if I double that to 100, I'm going to need twice as many housing units. So I've got this one and this one set up for the new duplicates. And then I moved the old ones. So they used to be kind of like in this area and in this area. So I moved them up a little bit so that I could fit them at the same vertical location. And then I also made Hydra, because all of those duplicates take a lot of oxygen. And I tried making a video on this, but it ended up being really short and unoriginal. I literally just copied this straight from the wiki, so I wasn't adding anything. But this needs to be fed by 2 pipes of water. The hydrogen and oxygen is split in this tile into the 2 different columns there. Then the 2 liquids in here keep the electrolyzer from overpressurizing, so it just constantly works. They do turn off once this atmosensor and this atmosensor detect enough pressure, because there's 2 conditions where I want these to run. If I don't have enough hydrogen for my cryofuel production, or if I don't have enough oxygen to feed my duplicates. Then it's really important to limit the extraction pumps. If pressure is ever too low, then these need to turn back off, because I never want them to pull a vacuum. These 2 chambers need to be properly seated with the different gases. So I wanted oxygen up here, so I started with oxygen there, and then I had to put hydrogen down in here. Otherwise, this column here, when the gases split from this tile, they won't go to the correct location. So by putting the hydrogen in first and the oxygen in first, it tells the gases where to go. So first, I'm sending the hydrogen up to the cryofuel production. Same with the excess oxygen. But if that doesn't need any, then I just burn off the rest with these generators here. And other than that, I haven't really done much else. Oh, I got the bottom of the map cleaned up, so there's no more liquids down there. And I've started blocking up unused areas, just to remove duplicate pathing and hopefully increase frame rate. So that should get everyone caught up now. Now I can talk about the main topic, the Regolith melter. So there's like 5 or 6 different parts to this that all needed to be made together so that the whole thing could work, and it broke on me a few times, and it was just really frustrating to try and record. So again, this is just going to be an overview explanation video, not necessarily a building video. So it all starts with the collection up here. This is just the standard sweeper, miner, loader setup. The Regolith is shipped out. And I'm actually sending it down the rocket silos here to, first off, preheat the Regolith, but second, it keeps the silo from overheating. I had to launch so many rockets to heat up this heat buffer here that these doors actually started overheating. So I needed a way to cool off the silo, and I figured, well, I've got 2 rails of Regolith, I might as well just send the Regolith through. And that does a fantastic job of preheating the Regolith and cooling off the silo at the same time. And you can see it is thermally isolated from the heat block there. That's really important, because you only want the column right here to heat up when the rocket returns or launches. But we'll come back to that. Let's follow the Regolith here. Once it's preheated, it goes over to the entrance of the heat exchange. So these steel columns allow the outgoing igneous rock to gradually heat up the incoming Regolith. So the Regolith steps up in temperature through all of these, and the igneous steps down in temperature as it moves to the left. The next place the Regolith goes is directly to the melter, where it just rotates on this conveyor rail here. You can see there's some empty carriages once it melts, and when the empty carriages reach this bridge, they just kind of disappear. If the Regolith doesn't happen to melt in time, then it just gets recirculated. Now these melters need to be kept above the minimum temperature is like 1417, but in practice 1420 is pretty good temperature. So whenever this gets too cold, these doors will close and pull some heat from the heat buffer. The next step, you can see that once the magma gets to a certain threshold, it'll spill over into the solidifier here. So these tiles here need to be kept below the freezing point of magma, and that is detected with this thermosensor here, set to 1395, and it's just sitting in some steam so it can actually interact. If this ever gets too warm, then this door will close, and the heat will flow from these tiles into these tiles here, and those are cooled by this loop here, which also happens to cool off this machinery. But that just returns back to the steam turbine here. So if we keep following the igneous, once it condenses, it's shipped out across the heat exchange, and then sent up through all of these coolers. So it goes through these metal tiles here, heats up the metal tiles, and whenever this steam room gets too cold, so if it's ever less than 190, these doors will engage, and heat will flow from the metal tiles at the bottom where the rock is, up into the steam room. Now this is important because the igneous is actually at 1200 degrees, so you don't want that to be directly interacting with the steam room, otherwise these steam turbines are going to be producing a lot of excess heat. Right? You only want to take as much heat from the rock as you need without overheating the steam turbine. So those doors just control temperature flow, and then by the time it gets through the third loop, the doors are pretty much just always closed because there's not enough heat left in the rock. But all of those cool it down to 180 there, 173 there. So there is a little bit more cooling I need to do on this rock before I can actually use it. The final plan is going to be feeding it to stone hatches, and these guys can eat igneous rock, and they turn half of it into coal. Problem is that they like to be somewhere between 10 and 40 degrees. So if I have a constant supply of igneous rock near 200 degrees, wherever I send it will heat up to the temperature of the rock. So I need to cool off the rock before sending it to the hatches. So I'll need one more piece of equipment right in this area to perform the final cooling on the igneous. It'll probably just be a bunch of aqua tuners. Once it's down to this temperature, it's hard to extract heat passively. But that is a total of 60 steam turbines, all powering the 2 grids. So I have 4 grids on this map. There's the left, middle right, and right power grid. So the middle right power grid, see, none of this is on right now, and these batteries are fully charged. The rightmost power grid, same thing. These batteries are fully charged, and nothing is on here. So the Regolith melter alone has completely negated the need for the sour gas boiler. It's still running, because I can't turn it off once it's on. So I'm just accumulating, we're up to 2,000 kilos of natural gas now. But the final piece of equipment here, well, I guess there's 2 things. There's the heat buffer, which can accept heat from rocket exhaust and from this piping here. So, because there was so much steam pressure in here, it took forever to heat this up. So I tried to find every heat source on the map I had to just throw heat at this thing. So this is a magma pipe, and then this is a molten metal pipe. So if we follow the magma pipe all the way back to the source, all the way down to here, got some volcanoes, just combining their outputs with a tricked pump here with some visco gel. This hydro sensor is really important to put in. Make sure you put a hydro sensor there. You don't want this pump to be running constantly and producing extra heat if there's not enough magma in here. So like if we come back to this one's off because there's not enough magma. But this just combines with this magma. And in total, across all the volcanoes, I calculate 2,210 grams a second on average. So half of that magma is 1105. That gets sent over to this heat buffer, and then the other half will be sent to this side of the map. I haven't quite finished this heat buffer yet. But that can only get this up to about 1,700 degrees. Assuming I don't lose any heat on the insulated piping on getting the magma here. So I have this secondary pipe over here, and that connects to my metal volcanoes. So the first one, if we follow that pipe, comes over to this copper volcano. And then it also connects into, oh, looks like this one's on. Connects over to this iron volcano. Now there's this really cool thing you can do with pitcher pumps and bottle drainers using an auto sweeper. The auto sweeper can use the pitcher pump to grab molten metal, only molten metal, this doesn't work with magma, and put it in a drainer, which is an easy way of getting molten metal into a pipe. And that is just sent up to the heat buffer, and I'm throttling it to 1,000 grams just to make sure none of the pipes break. It's almost up to temperature. Once this gets to 1,500 degrees, I think that's the melting point of iron. 1534. It's got to get up to 1534 before I can unlimit it. But once the magma and molten metals have dropped off their heat to the heat buffer, they need to be pre-processed. So that's what this machine here does. You can see the cooler magma down to 1500 degrees. So it goes in at 1600, and it leaves about 100 degrees colder. I have no use for it at this point, so I'm just turning it into igneous rock. Comes into the corner right here, solidifies, drops off its heat, then the auto sweeper picks it up, and it gets shipped out across this counterflow here that is constantly being kept cool by the output of the steam turbines. So the 95-degree water counterflows against the leaving igneous rock. Same thing on this side, this counterflows against the outgoing refined metals. And then for the final cooling, this aqua tuner is set to turn on if anything is above 0, to keep this area very cold, to try and chill this off a little bit further. See, it doesn't work too well, but I guess I could swap out this tile and this corner tile for some metal tiles, just so that it exchanges heat a little better. So I'll show the overlays one more time here. This is the shipping overlay. Really, it's just important in this little area here. How you get the regolith here is not that important. Here is the automation. Really not much automation there. And then the automation on the doors here, not too interesting there. Here is the power overlay. So one wire can power all of this. Then to get power into the aqua tuners here, I'm just using like a center power spine there with all of these transformers. These doors technically don't need to be powered. They're just much more responsive if they are powered. Then for plumbing, to route the cooling loop and the steam turbine outputs through the same location was a little tricky. But each steam turbine cools off the tile directly underneath it. Just because of the way the doors work, right? The doors detect the temperature directly above it, so each steam turbine kind of patrols its own area. Now, getting the pressure right in this room was also a little tricky, because there's not much space, so these vents have a tendency to overpressurize very easily. So I would recommend just filling up this whole bottom layer here with water and not letting it spill over to the top. Then you'll have 500 kilos per tile, and that seems to work fine. I did have to redo the gas pipes here because I took out the old electrolyzers that were here, because once I got in the hydras, it was just much easier to route the piping. I didn't need a separate electrolyzer setup to feed cryofuels. So the pipes very carefully dodge the heat exchange. Otherwise, this is pretty much the same as what I built in the cryofuel episode. So the plans for the next episode, obviously I'm going to have to double everything I built over here on the left side. But I also want to get all of the machinery up here swapped over to thermium so that I don't have to run this cooling loop anymore. Right, the only reason I need this is because this stuff is made out of steel. But if I swap it over to thermium, then the regolith will actually enter the heat exchange at a higher temperature, because right now this regolith is sitting on actively cooled tiles, so a little bit of that heat is getting lost. And if I take the heat from the regolith instead of from the igneous rock, then it's a net heat loss, because regolith has a smaller specific heat capacity than igneous. I'd rather keep the heat in the regolith and then multiply that heat at the state change, then cool off the regolith with a lower specific heat capacity, require more heat at the state change, and then not have as much in the igneous, right? The hotter you can make the regolith when it enters the heat exchange means the hotter the igneous will be when it exits the heat exchange. Right, and we're pulling the heat from the igneous, not the regolith, because the igneous has a higher specific heat capacity, which means there's more heat per degree Celsius. Which just means more power. Not that I need the power at this point. Now, the only problem with swapping all of this over to thermium is that I am currently out of tungsten. Right? No more tungsten. And the only way for me to get more tungsten at the moment is by going to this glimmering planet, which is quite far away. So I think what I might do, once I get this whole thing duplicated, is make an abyssalite melter. Now, in the past, you could use insulation. It would melt into tungsten. But now, there's been a change where it melts into tungsten and sour gas, which is really annoying. So, melting insulation doesn't work for making tungsten anymore. But if you melt abyssalite, that melts straight into tungsten. And I think that might be an easier way of getting a lot of tungsten, rather than having to send all my rockets out to this glimmering planet. I'll also need to make that secondary cooler here, and then put in some hatch ranches. I don't know, maybe about here, or over here would work. But this is probably one of the most complicated builds I've made. It's actually more annoying to make than the sour gas boiler was, because this provides its own heat with these aqua tuners, so it's self-sustaining. Right, I just have to build it. I don't have to rely on anything else. This relies on external heat provided by volcanoes and rockets. So it requires an external input in order to function. And so all of these moving parts needed to come together in order for the entire system to work. I think a good comparison to show just how powerful melting regolith is, this is the old cooling system. It only needed 5 steam turbines to cool off the entire top of the map up here. The machinery and the regolith was handled by 5 steam turbines. But when you compare that to the regolith melter, well, it takes 60 steam turbines to do the same thing, because we're cooling igneous instead of regolith. So just looking at the scale difference too, you really have to decide, do you want to spend this much infrastructure? Do you need to spend that much infrastructure? Or is cooling regolith better than melting regolith? If you plan on feeding shovels, then obviously you have to go with the regolith cooler. But if you want to feed stone hatches instead, which I think is much easier than shovels, regolith melter's the way to go. So I've got my work cut out for me. I've got to duplicate that whole thing over on this side, and then we can get into abyssalite melting, and by then I'll probably have enough igneous rock to make a whole bunch of hatch ranches. So it was a little bit of a different style of episode. Just given the complexity of the design, I think this was more appropriate. But that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.